tell your own hand to close. Go on right now, and watch it obey you without a thought. Mine would not. Inside 1 week, I had gone from a working man to paralyzed from the neck down, and 3 specialists told my wife the same single word over my bed. Permanent. Fit the house for a wheelchair. A little over 2 years after that, I walked the length of my own kitchen on my own 2 legs. What carried me out of that chair was something no doctor had thought to hand me, a tissue they had all overlooked, the sheet wrapped around every muscle you own, and a handful of plain movements I taught myself on a cold floor. But you have to see where it started. It began on an ordinary morning, out in my own back garden with an armful of firewood, when my legs simply stopped taking orders, the way a light goes out when the power drops. I went down into the frost and could not get an arm out to break the fall. I lay there and watched my own breath melt a little circle in the ice, and I gave my hands that same plain order, close, and felt nothing answer. I had framed houses with those hands for 40 years. They had a name for what had taken me down, a long one, Guillain-Barre. My own body's defenses had turned around and started stripping the covering off my own nerves, from the feet up, and once that covering is gone, the signal does not arrive. And a leg with no signal is a leg made of sand. The doctors were kind and they were honest, and they told my wife to have the house looked at for a wheelchair for the rest of my life. This is the part I need you to understand, because it is the same thing being said, right now, over a great many of you watching me. What they told her was honest, and it was the likeliest way it usually goes, which is exactly why it fools you. A thing said in a white coat stops sounding like the odds and starts sounding like the weather. Most people handed that believe the coat. I believed it too for a long stretch of dark weeks, and then I stopped believing it. The day I finally understood one thing about my own body that nobody in that hospital had the time to tell me. The signal was already coming back, slowly, all on its own, and I was wasting it? Here is what those dark weeks taught me, and everything I'm about to show you turns on it. When a body stops moving, it is not resting. It is quietly beginning to set. For years I pictured my body as something I had built, the way I framed my houses. Lying in that bed, I finally saw it another way. A body is the power running through the walls, and mine was cutting out room by room while the frame stood there whole. And when I went still, when I lay in that bed for weeks not moving, the power did not only switch off in my legs, the house itself began to seize. The soft webbing that wraps every muscle and every joint you own, the tissue that is meant to glide, it dries out and stiffens the moment you hold still, and it begins gluing together the parts of you that are supposed to slide free. My doctors kept their eyes on the nerves while underneath everything they were charting, that tissue was quietly going hard, and no machine in the building was pointed at it. My hips began to lock, the backs of my legs shortened and drew tight. My shoulders drew inward, and I understood lying there that I was fighting 2 enemies, and every person around me was only swinging at one of them. The nerves were the injury. That stiffening, that quiet setting, was a second thing entirely, and it is the slow, everyday cousin of it, creeping into people who can still walk to their own kitchen this morning, but have started to dread the trip. A body does not break, it goes dark, and even a dark house can be lit back up, if you know the one switch nobody ever checks. That switch is the reason I eventually wrote the whole of it down. Everything that floor taught me, so nobody else would ever have to find it alone in the dark the way I did. I will point you to all of it near the end, once you have the first movements in your own hands. For now, come back down to the floor with me, because the floor is where I found the way out. The morning it turned, I was on the floor. It is the least heroic scene you will ever picture. 5 in the morning, the house dark, my wife asleep down the hall, and me on the cold bedroom carpet, because I had decided that if the signal was going to come back on its own, I was not going to lie in a bed and let the rest of me rot while it did. I could barely move at all, so I took one leg, the stiffer of the 2, and I moved it through 6 inches of range, out and back, and that was the whole of my first morning. 6 inches, from a man who used to frame a roof by lunchtime. A few weeks into that, on an ordinary Tuesday, working that same stiff leg, my big toe moved, all on its own, just the once. No doctor had done that. The wiring was healing quietly underneath the whole time, the way it does, and my working that leg had kept a road open for it to travel down. That toe was the first light coming back on in the house. And the moment I felt it, I understood the whole job in front of me. The nerves would mend on their own clock, and there was nothing I could do to hurry them. But I could keep the joints from locking and the muscle from wasting away to nothing while I waited. So that on the day the signal finally reached my legs, it found legs that could still answer it. A body left to seize for 2 years will not stand up on the day the wiring comes back. Keeping mine moving was the whole difference between walking again and merely feeling the current arrive in a body too far gone to use it. So I started reading, at my own kitchen table, late into the night, because there is a particular way a man reads when the thing on the page is his own 2 legs. And I found the word the whole hospital had somehow never said to me. Fascia. That soft webbing I told you about. The tissue that wraps every muscle and every joint and every organ you own, right now as you sit there. There are people who have given their whole lives to studying it, and what they have found is plain enough that a builder can say it in one breath. That tissue is mostly water. When you move, it stays wet and slick, and everything slides. When you go still, it dries out and hardens. The way good grease in a hinge left out in the weather turns to varnish and locks the door solid. My doctors were treating the nerves, and they were right too. Nobody was treating the hinge, and you can chase the ache in a stiffening body with a pill until the day you die, and never once reach the tissue that is actually holding you shut. So down on that floor, across the better part of 2 years, out of all that reading and all that failing, I built myself a handful of movements. Nothing I had to buy. Nothing you could not begin tonight from wherever you are sitting, and I will walk you through every one. Because the tissue does not much care what put you still, whether it was something as big as what took me, or only the years and the chair and the long sit. It stiffens the same way in all of us, and it frees the same way. It answers to the same plain handful of things. I called the first one the inch. Every joint I could still reach, once a day, I took slowly through the whole arc it still owned, out as far as it would honestly go, and back. When all I owned was 6 inches, I moved 6 inches. I did it slow and never for strength. I did it to remind the tissue what moving even felt like, over and over, so it would not forget the shape of it while the rest of me caught up. You do the very same thing tonight, and you do not need to be recovering from anything at all. You take your neck, your shoulders, your hips, your ankles, one at a time, slow, through everything they still have in them. That is you keeping the road open. Then there was the water. Wherever I had gone tightest by evening, the back of a thigh, a calf, I would ease into one gentle stretch, only to the edge, never into real pain, hold it a breath, and let it go. It sounds like nothing, but dry tissue that is stretched and then released drinks its water back in on the letting go. The way a hard old sponge softens the instant you wet it and wring it out. That one I came to call the flood. The gentle hold and the slow release does everything a hard yank never could. The move that saved more than my body was the plainest one of the lot, getting down onto the floor and getting myself back up off it. Because the day you cannot do that on your own is the day somebody else quietly starts deciding where you get to live. I could not manage it at all at first, so I did it against a chair, hand over hand, a little more every week until the rise came back. Guard that one like money if you still have it. And if you cannot rebuild it gently from a chair, a little at a time, it is the one skill that keeps your own front door yours. And then the last of them, the walk. Most people save walking for when they are already well again. I used it to get there, and I was done waiting for permission. Wait through the legs. A few more steps than yesterday. Every single day. Because a leg only stays a leg by carrying you somewhere. And a chair steals that back 1 hour at a time. I went from 6 inches on a cold floor to the length of the hall, to the garden gate, to the top of my own stairs. Slower than anybody alive could stand to watch. And that is the honest speed of a comeback. Now, if you have felt that same stiffness creeping up your own legs while I have been talking, the seizing in the hip when you stand out of a chair, the hand that has started reaching for the rail, then that is good news, and I mean it, because it means the tissue is only setting, and setting is the one thing you can undo. I think of a widow I heard from in her 70s, who told me she had not been able to get down to her own garden in 3 years. Nothing in her was broken. Her body had quietly seized up over 3 still years in a chair, and nobody had ever told her that it could be undone. She started with the inch. 6 weeks later, she was down on her knees in her own soil again. It had only gone dark. She found the switch. That is why I finally gathered all of it into one place. Every movement that brought me back. And the ones I found later for the balance, the weak legs, the swollen evening ankles, the poor sleep, and the plain skill of staying in your own home. 7 guides in one library, and I called it the Complete Comeback Body Library, and I priced it the way I wish somebody had priced my own way out. $49.99, when those guides run $133 apart, and less than you would hand over for a single appointment that sends you home stiffer than you came. 7 days to try it, and if you are not looser and steadier, you take back every dollar and keep the guides anyway. It is all at ray.commonguides.com, and the code is on your screen. Then come back to me, because I have saved the one part that makes every bit of it work. Because here's what nearly cost me everything twice. When the first real strength came back, I wanted my old body back that same week. I had been a strong man, so I pushed. I hauled myself up too hard, and I forced the stretch, and I did the one big session, the way a working man thinks he must. And every time, the tissue fought back harder, and I lost a week to it. It took me a long time to trust the thing that turned out to be the whole secret, because it went against everything a working man is taught. Gentle is the work. The tissue yields to a slow, patient hand, and it fights a hard one, every single time. And I learned that the painful way, forcing my old body and losing a fortnight to it more than once. The people who stay stuck are almost never the lazy ones. They came at their own body swinging, the way I did, lost that fight, and walked away certain their body was finished. Their bodies still had years left in them. What they had run out of was the right way to ask. Which brings me to the one thing I most need you to hear, because it is the mistake that keeps good people stiff for the rest of their lives. When you finally go and ask for help with an aching, stiffening body, you get sent to stretch the muscle, pull the hamstring, lengthen the hip, and you do it, faithfully, for months, and you stay just as stiff, and you decide it must be you, just your age, just the way things go now. It was never you. All those faithful months, the pulling was landing on the muscle, while the real trouble sat in the sheet wrapped around it, that dried, thickened, glued-down webbing, and you cannot stretch a dried sheet longer. The people who study this settled the question years ago. A hard stretch will not lengthen that tissue no matter how long you hang on. Water and motion are what free it. The gentle hold that lets it drink, the daily inch that keeps it sliding. So if all that faithful stretching left you exactly where you started, that was never your failing. You were handed the wrong tool for the right job, and no amount of effort ever makes a wrong tool right. So here's the right one. There was an ordinary Tuesday, a little over 2 years after the morning I went down in the frost, when I walked the length of my own kitchen, turned at the window, and walked back, and my wife had to sit down because she was quietly crying, and I had not even noticed I was doing it. That is the strange thing about a comeback. Nobody hands you one great dramatic moment, it just creeps in on you like a habit. One morning, the stiffness that used to own the whole first hour of your day is just a little later, and a little smaller, and then one morning you are halfway to the kettle before you notice it never came at all. What came back was my own body, the one that had been under the seizing the entire time, waiting for someone to keep the road open until the lights came back on. That is the truth I promised you at the very start, and I would carve it over the door of every office where a man was measured for a chair he did not need. A body does not break, it goes dark. And I have watched too many bodies come back on now. I will never again call a dark one finished. Mine came back from paralyzed and silent to standing at the top of my own stairs, with my hand nowhere near the rail. Yours is only stiff. Yours is only asking for the road to be kept open, and you can begin keeping it open tonight. So here is where I leave you. It took me the better part of 2 years, and most of that was learning what not to do. So do not let anybody sell you a week. But you do not need 2 years to feel the first thing move. Tonight, before you sleep, do the inch. Pick one stiff joint, a hip, the neck, one ankle, and take it slowly through every bit of range it still owns. Out and back, 10 times over. That is you telling the tissue the day is not finished and the house is not dark yet. When you want the rest of it, the 4 movements and the whole comeback for the whole body, the code is there on your screen, and the link is in the description below. That is the library. Everything that floor taught me, put into your hands. Now picture the morning a year from today. You wake, and you're halfway across your own kitchen before it lands on you what did not happen. No bracing on the nightstand. No waiting for your body to let go of you. Just a man or a woman up on their own 2 legs, in the home they fought to keep. There is no miracle in that, and I'm standing here as the proof. It is a road you keep open. one gentle morning at a time. Next time, the single movement I would give a body just starting to lose its balance, the one that ends the fear of the floor before the floor ever gets you.